Welcome to Nero Wolfe's world, where orchids bloom and secrets unfold. Tell us where you're tuning in from. Archie will keep score, Wolfe won't admit he cares. Subscribe for more classic Nero Wolfe mysteries. Every good mystery deserves good company, and a little gratitude between cases. A warm thank you to Norma, our newest patron. Your support keeps the orchids blooming and the mysteries alive. Join the circle of mystery lovers on Patreon. Link in description. Nero Wolfe in the night. He left the Brownstone. The telephone rang at 12 minutes past midnight, and right there I knew the night wasn't going to stay respectable. Fritz never touches the instrument after 11, and Wolfe treats it like a venomous snake that occasionally brings him money. That left me, the only soul in the Brownstone whose curiosity still works after business hours. "Mr. Wolfe's residence," I said, keeping the drawl polite enough to sound awake. A woman's voice came through, low, tense, and quivering like the last note of a violin. "Please, Mr. Wolfe, I must speak to him. He knows what I took." Now, if you want to catch my attention, start a sentence that way. "He does he?" I said. "That's a neat trick, since he's retired for the night and hasn't known a thing worth knowing since supper. Who's calling?" "Veronica Vale," she breathed. "And if you were reading a playbill any time this season, you'd recognize the name. Broadway's gilded siren of the Garrick Theatre and the gossip column's favourite dessert." "I can't wake Mr. Wolfe for gossip," I told her. "He rises for orchids, eats for cash, and sleeps for sanity." Her reply sliced through my wisecrack. "They'll kill me if I hang up." That tone dropped the temperature a solid 10 degrees. "All right, Miss Vale, what exactly did you take?" "I can't say on the telephone. Tell him it's about the Garrick murder. He'll understand." Her breath hitched. "Please, Mr. Goodwin, I know your voice. They said I could trust you." If flattery's a bribe, she'd just bought 10 minutes of Wolfe's sleep. I told her to hold, then crossed the carpet to the door of Wolfe's bedroom. The light under it was still on. So much for sleep. He was sitting up in bed in his brown silk robe, reading Plutarch, and looking as pleased about the interruption as a cat doused with seltzer. "Archie," he said, "the time, if you please." "Midnight and a whisper," I told him. "Veronica Vale on the wire. Says you know what she took and someone's after her." He laid the book down with a sigh that could have deflated the mattress. "Confound theatrical women, always certain their peril is unique. Tell her I do not receive clients at this hour." "She says it's about the Garrick murder." That got him. The eyebrow arched, the lips pursed. "Indeed? The producer found shot last week. One Harold Lanning's associate?" "The same. Want to tell her that while she still breathes?" He closed his eyes a moment, considering the moral weight of exertion. "Very well. Bring the telephone." I carried it in. Wolfe took the receiver like a relic. "Madam," he rumbled, "this is Nero Wolfe. You have intruded upon my repose. You mentioned a theft. Of what?" A pause. Then her voice, trembling harder. "A contract. Proof that Lanning and others fixed investors' funds. I only meant to hold it, to protect him. But someone found out. Oh!" A gasp, muffled words, then the line rattled with static. "Miss Vale?" I barked. No answer. Then a whisper. "If I'm not there when you come, remember, the pearl—" Click. Wolfe stared at the receiver as if expecting it to apologize. "Phooey. Hysteria is a tax upon intelligence." "Maybe, but she paid in advance. She wants help." He was already reaching for the bell cord. Fritz appeared like a ghost in pajamas. "Beer," Wolfe ordered, chilled. "And Goodwin, put on your coat." "Meaning?" "You will go to this theatre, the Garrick. I decline to receive nocturnal melodrama here." "I like that," I said. "You'll send me to catch bullets while you sip malt." He gave me the look usually reserved for misplaced commas. "Archie, there are intervals when gallantry is not virtue but folly. Do not indulge it. You will observe, inquire, and return." I grinned. "Yes, sir. I'll even try to avoid getting murdered before breakfast." He muttered something about Providence favouring fools as I left. Outside, Manhattan had that bleary hush it keeps between curtain calls and sunrise, when cabbies doze on their horns and neon dies one letter at a time. I hailed a cab at 35th and told the driver to make it the Garrick Theatre, West 48th, and to pretend I was late for a tragedy. The streets rolled past in sleepy glints of wet asphalt, though it hadn't rained, just the city sweating out another August night. When we stopped at the alley beside the Garrick, the air reeked of garbage, grease paint and perfume that had forgotten its owner. A stage door light flickered weakly overhead. The door itself hung half open. "Stay handy," I told the driver, slipping him $1. Inside the alley, shadows had more personality than people. I called softly, "Miss Vale." No answer. Only a distant hum of traffic and a low hiss from a vent. My shoes scuffed over something small and hard. I bent, struck a match, and found a single pearl earring lying in a smear of pink stage paint. Expensive, foreign, and lonely. I pocketed it carefully, meaning to bag it proper later, when a sound froze me, a quick intake of breath somewhere beyond the fire escape. "Miss Vale?" This time the answer was a shriek, thin and short, then silence so deep it swallowed the city. I ran toward the sound, gun drawn, but the alley ended in brick. No footprints except mine and the faint tracks of a cab's tires heading out. The only witness was a poster of Veronica herself, smiling down in a swirl of sequins and deceit. Back at the street, my driver blinked as I yanked the door open. "You see anyone leave?" He shook his head. "Just a cab, black one, went east fast." "License?" "Didn't catch it. Thought it was yours." I told him it wasn't, and gave him the look that keeps cabbies honest. Then I used a payphone on the corner to ring the Brownstone. Wolfe answered on the third ring, which for him was the equivalent of a sprint. "Well?" "Your client missed her cue. She's gone, and not to the Catskills. I found her jewellery in a scream." He was silent. I could hear the faint hiss of beer being poured. Describe the earring. "Single pearl, grease paint on the mount, designer stuff. That indicates proximity to the theatre, stage cosmetics, and the scream? Real, one performance only." He inhaled audibly. "Return at once. You are not a policeman." "True, but I hate cliffhangers." "Archie, relax. I'll bring the earring, not the corpse." He hung up before I could promise. I waited 10 minutes prowling the alley, but the city had closed its curtain. When a patrol car rolled by, I decided I'd had enough ambience for one night and headed back. The Brownstone was dark except for Wolfe's office. He sat behind the desk in that yellow monstrosity, robe folded like armour, a book open but unread. "Well?" he demanded. "Nothing but echoes. Whoever she was running from got there first. And unless you count this," I laid the earring on his blotter, "that's all she left." He leaned forward, peered through half-lidded eyes. "Stage paint. Pink. Artificial. So she came directly from rehearsal or performance, and she used your name, not mine. She said she trusted me. I have that effect on frightened women." "Frightened women," he said, "are indiscriminate. You will give me a full account." I did, every word, sound and smell, while he listened with the patience of a man timing yeast. When I finished, he nodded once. "Fui, an actress, a murder, a missing contract, and now disappearance. Our tranquility is ruined." "It was never tranquil after 9 p.m, I said. "Want me to phone Kramer?" "Not yet. Let us first verify whether Miss Vale is in any condition to contradict you." "Meaning the morgue run," he frowned. "Do not be flippant." "Too late. It's congenital." He tugged the bell cord. Fritz appeared, balancing a tray with Wolfe's beer and my coffee. Wolfe dismissed him with a nod. "Archie, you will rise at 9. At 10 you will ascertain discreetly the status of Miss Vale. Should the Gazette or the police report her demise, we shall reconsider our position." "Fine. And if she's alive?" "Then she owes me an apology for the hour." I stood, stretching. "If you ever write your memoirs, call them How to Win Friends and Influence Corpses." His glare could have sterilized silverware. "To bed, Archie." "Yes, sir." I pocketed the earring in a labelled envelope and started for the hall. Behind me, his voice stopped me. "Archie?" "Yeah?" "Exercise caution. You are rash." That was Wolfe speak for "be careful," and rarer than an unpaid bill in his files. I nodded and left him to his beer and his thoughts. Upstairs, the city's hum barely reached through the curtains. Somewhere out there, Veronica Vale had screamed her last note, or maybe not. Either way, the next curtain was going to rise on us. And if there's one thing I've learned about Nero Wolfe, it's that when trouble knocks, he lets me answer the door. If you ever want to smell ambition cooked medium rare, Try standing backstage at a Broadway theatre before dawn. That morning the garrick had the aroma, powder, sweat, singed paper, and one fresh corpse with lipstick still on. The Gazette boys were already outside yelling headlines before the morgue wagon even backed in. Veronica Vale found dead in dressing room, Star's last curtain. The bulbs flashed, the cops barked, and I slipped past them with the grin of a man too tired to lie. Inspector Kramer was there, red-eyed and puffing a cigar thick enough to qualify as arson. He spotted me like a bull sights a red flag. "Goodwin." The cigar bounced when he said it. "You got a license to haunt crime scenes now?" "I left it in my other tuxedo," I told him. "Wolfe sent me." He growled something about Wolfe being allergic to fresh air and waved me through. That's Kramer's way of saying he'd rather have me inside where he could watch me. The corridor to Veronica's dressing room looked like the aftermath of a parade. Makeup trays overturned, a fallen feather fan, someone's boa half twisted around a chair leg, a pair of mascara-stained tissues made the place look like it had cried after the fact. She was sprawled on the rug near her vanity, the mirror cracked into a spiderweb that caught her reflection a dozen ways. Veronica Vale had always been billed as the woman no man could forget. She'd found a way to make sure of it. A service revolver lay near her hand, but not near enough to sell the suicide story. Her evening robe shimmered under the bulbs, shot through with tiny sequins that caught the light and mocked her stillness. I took a step closer and noted the smell: perfume, powder, and gun oil. Somebody here liked mixing romance with ordnance. Pearlie Stebbins lumbered in from the hall, pad in hand. "Goodwin," he said like it was a diagnosis. "Don't tell me Wolfe's already in on this circus." "He's in bed, and you should be too," I said. "But since he's smarter than either of us, he sent me instead." He grunted. "Try not to pocket any evidence this time. I'd need longer pockets." He ignored me and went back to his notes. That's what I like about Pearlie. He can insult you without taking time off from breathing. The wall clock above the vanity was smashed and useless. Its hands, theatrically stuck at 11:42, told me nothing we could trust. The glass face was cracked, and the minute hand stuck halfway between guilt and coincidence. I crouched beside the wastebasket. Among a mess of tissues and cigarette stubs was a half-burned contract page, expensive bond paper, initials VV and HL in black fountain ink. Wolfe's nose for paper trail had rubbed off on me. I slid the fragment into an evidence envelope and handed it to Stebbins when he logged the room. He answered on the first ring, which meant Fritz had woken him with the news. "Yes?" "Veronica Vale's in no condition for callbacks," I said. "Dead in her dressing room, gun by her hand, contract in ashes." "Phooey, how theatrical." "That's the idea. Kramer's here, fuming enough to light the marquee." "Observe," Wolfe commanded. "The contract, you said, bears initials HL." "Right." "Harold Lanning, the producer. He is a man with the facial arrangement of a satyr and the disposition of a goose. Note the time of death if possible, and who cries too much." "You mean, who acts too much?" "Precisely. You will return when fatigue makes you incoherent." "Then plan breakfast for noon." I hung up and turned back to the room. Kramer was questioning Lanning himself, a tall slab of tuxedo with enough pomade to waterproof a dinghy. His face was pale, but his tone was pure rehearsal. She called me around 11, he was saying, and wanted to see me. I refused. She was upset, irrational." "Rational enough to get shot," Kramer said. Lanning dabbed his forehead with a silk square that cost more than my week's pay. "Inspector, she had enemies. Jealous understudies, pressmen. You can't think I—" Kramer cut him off. "We'll do the thinking. Sit down." I looked around and found the understudy herself, Gloria Dane, leaning against the doorframe. She was small, fox-faced, with eyes that never stopped calculating. Her tears were neat, symmetrical, like something directed by a man with good lighting sense. "Miss Dane," I said, "rough night?" "She was my friend," she whispered, voice trembling at the right intervals. "We were like sisters." I nodded. "Sure, the Cain and Abel kind." She blinked. "I don't know what you mean." "I mean sisters who write anonymous notes to the gossip columns." Her face froze, then thawed into indignation. "I never—" Kramer's voice barked from behind me. "Goodwin, let me handle the witnesses." "Sure, Inspector," I said. "I'll just keep breathing quietly." He snorted, but didn't toss me out. Maybe he wanted Wolfe's angle later. While he grilled Lanning again, I took a casual stroll through the dressing room. A framed photo of Veronica and Lanning sat on the table, she in costume, he smiling like a cat with cream. There were 2 lipstick shades on the rim of her glass, one bright red, one pale rose. 2 guests? Or just artistic versatility? Under the vanity table, a scuff mark, male shoe polish, black, recent. The theatre's stagehands wore brown. I filed that under interesting and kept moving. In the corridor, I found Tommy Reese, a wiry ex-GI with hands that wouldn't stay still. He said he'd been checking props when he heard the shot. "Props at midnight?" I asked. "What were you rehearsing? Burglary?" His Adam's apple jumped. Miss Vale asked me to fix a hinge, that's all." "Sure. And she thanked you with a bullet." He swallowed. "You're not the police." "No, but I'm the guy who'll tell them if you lie. Start again." He hesitated, then said, "There was a man here earlier, before she came in. I heard them arguing. I didn't see his face." "Voice?" "Could have been Lanning's, could have been the doorman, I don't know." That made him my official red herring of the morning. Just enough fact to smell true, just enough fog to waste time. I left him twitching and went outside for air that didn't reek of powder and panic. The sun had started nudging the skyline, turning the street into a dull gold canyon. A newsboy shouted again, selling tragedy for 2 cents. I phoned Wolfe from the corner booth. "Report," he said. "She's confirmed dead. Guns hers, or planted. Lanning's sweating cologne, the understudies rehearsing grief, and a stagehand heard voices that might belong to anyone. Phooey, the universal chorus of guilt. There's more. A wall clock stopped at 11:42. Noted. The contract? Half burned, initials VV and HL on it. I've got a photostat in mind. Do so, and observe Lanning's eyes when you mention the contract. I'll need to mention it loudly. He's busy avoiding Kramer's cigar smoke. Wolfe sighed. You will take care not to be arrested. My breakfast depends upon your liberty. Touching, how you equate affection with appetite. Archie? Yes, sir? Do not improvise gallantry. Never. I'll stick to sarcasm. I hung up and headed back inside. Kramer was finishing with Lanning. You can go for now, he said, but don't leave the city. Lanning bristled. You have no right. Kramer pointed with his cigar. Try me. When the producer had stormed off, I leaned toward Kramer. You believe his alibi? I believe in facts, he said. The facts say she's dead, and the only guy who benefits is him. You're forgetting understudies. He squinted through smoke. You think the Dane girl did it? I think she's crying too evenly. And she just told me Veronica had letters from a lover she was going to expose. Kramer grunted. Another angle. Or a decoy, he eyed me. Wolfe working this one? Depends on who pays the retainer first. Tell him to stay out of my way. I always do, he never listens. Kramer left to chew a patrolman somewhere else. I turned back to the scene. The tech boys were dusting for prints. One of them waved the gun at me. No prints except hers, he said. Too clean, I muttered. What's that? Nothing, just admiring police efficiency, he grinned. We aim to please. Outside, the theatre lobby was clearing. I spotted Gloria Dane again, dabbing her eyes. She looked up and hissed softly. She deserved it, you know. She was cruel. That was something new. Cruel how? She'd promised to make me her successor, then told Lanning I was talentless. Maybe she was right. She slapped me. Not hard, but with commitment. I bowed slightly. Good form. Keep practicing. Her eyes glistened with something that wasn't grief now. You'll regret mocking me, Mr. Goodwin. Lady, I said, I've regretted better women. I left her steaming and went back to the dressing room for one last look. The mirror still held 12 reflections of a dead woman, each accusing in its own way. Broadway's queen had taken her final bow, and somewhere in those fractured lights lay the motive. As I closed the door behind me, Pearlie called out, You through snooping? For now, I said, but I'll be back for autographs. He muttered something unprintable, which counted as affection in his dialect. Back in the cab, I flipped open my notebook. Earring, single found, confirm if pair exists. Contract fragment saved. Clock stopped at 11:42. 3 suspects, 1 overacting. I called Wolfe once more from a diner halfway home. Your report grows tedious, he said when I finished. Death usually is, I told him. What's the verdict from your armchair? That the theatre, Mr. Goodwin, is an institution devoted to pretense. Find the first person who ceased pretending. Meaning? The one who was sincere, either in love or in hate. They always kill best. He hung up, leaving me with my coffee and the reflection of neon in the window, spelling Garrick backward. I drained the cup, dropped a dime on the counter, and thought about the dressing room, the perfume, the gun oil, the mirror's spider cracks. Broadway's glitter hides desperation, Wolfe had once said. Tonight, desperation had stolen the spotlight. When I got back to the Brownstone, the elevator was already humming. Wolfe was descending from the plant rooms, face set in concentration, the smell of orchids trailing like a clean conscience. "Well?" he asked. "The stage is yours," I said. "The audience is restless." He grunted approval. "Breakfast, then analysis. Fritz, the tray." As Fritz appeared with Wolfe's eggs and my coffee, I couldn't help noting that the smell of gun oil still clung to my jacket. Somewhere between the Garrick's glamour and the Brownstone's order, a killer was rehearsing his next act. And this time, Wolfe would write the curtain speech. At 10 sharp that morning, Inspector Kramer rang the Brownstone bell like he was punching a time clock on Judgment Day. Fritz gave me the look of a man caught between etiquette and homicide. Wolfe was upstairs with the orchids, right in the middle of his sacred 9 to 11 a.m. ritual, which meant I had to choose between protecting a rare blossom and saving Kramer's sanity. I decided to risk the latter. I opened the door and found Kramer scowling at the stoop, a cigar clenched between his teeth like it owed him money. His hat was pulled low, his coat unbuttoned, and his eyes had the gleam of a man who'd skipped breakfast to chase a headache. "Morning, Inspector," I said. "You're early for lunch and late for tact." "Can it, Goodwin," he growled, pushing past me. "Where's Wolfe?" "Neck deep in orchids. He doesn't come up for air till 11. "Then he can make an exception." I shrugged. "I'd suggest you try telling him that personally. I'll have the undertaker on standby." Kramer puffed smoke like a freight engine and stomped toward the office. Wolfe's orchids had faced humidity, mites, and Fritz's curry experiments, but never Kramer. I pressed the elevator button and rode up with the inspector, enjoying the idea that orchid pollen might cling to his coat as revenge. The door to the plant rooms opened, releasing a warm, perfumed cloud that could have softened a banker's heart. Wolfe stood among the pots in his apron, inspecting a cymbidium with the devotion of a priest. When he saw Kramer, his mouth compressed to a single word: inexcusable. "I warned him," I said. Kramer ignored the insult. "Wolfe, Vale called you before she died. Why?" Wolfe turned from the orchids slowly, as if considering whether Kramer qualified as an organism worth addressing. "Inspector, I receive many calls. A dead client is still a client until discharged. Shall we descend?" Kramer's cigar twitched. "She phoned you for help, and now she's in the morgue. You can drop the act." "Sir," Wolfe replied, "I never drop anything, except patience, Archie." That was my cue to escort Kramer back down. In the office, Wolfe took his throne behind the mahogany desk, the yellow chair fitting him like destiny. He signalled for Fritz, who appeared silently with coffee for the guest and blacker coffee for the host. I poured mine and stayed standing. Wolfe liked an audience arrangement with vertical contrast. Kramer sat, removed his hat, and scowled at the floor as though it had lied to him. "All right. You know she called. What did she want?" Wolfe folded his hands over his middle. "To consult me on a matter of theft and extortion." But she was interrupted. The line went dead. "Dead's right. She was shot less than an hour later." "That I deduced," Wolfe said dryly. "You're efficient." The cigar flared. "The slug we pulled matches a .32 automatic registered to Harold Lanning. He claims it was stolen from his desk last week. You've heard that name before." "Of course," Wolfe said. "A producer, I believe. Competent at commerce, less so at conscience." "Then you know he's our prime suspect." Wolfe's brows rose. "Is he indeed? You arrest swiftly these days." "No arrest yet. Gun's missing, motive's missing, but it'll come. She had something on him, maybe that contract you mentioned to Goodwin." I winced. Word travels faster than Western Union. Kramer jabbed the cigar in my direction. "Don't get cute, Goodwin. You were at that scene without authorization." "I was there with Wolfe's authorization. He ranks higher in my chain of command." Wolfe's lips twitched, almost a smile. Archie occasionally forgets the limitations of citizenship, but his observations are useful. Kramer leaned forward. What I need is cooperation, not vocabulary lessons. You got that contract page? It was turned over to your men, I said. Check Stebbins' inventory. He grunted. So, you didn't keep a copy? Not yet, Wolfe interceded smoothly. Inspector, I assure you we do not secrete police property. We prefer certified photostats for accuracy. Archie will apply for one through proper channels. Kramer looked like he wanted to light the cigar twice just to vent steam. I know your proper channels, Wolfe. They end in your desk drawer. Listen, if you're running this as a private case— I am not running anything, Wolfe said. I am considering. There is a difference. Kramer stood. Fine. Consider fast. The press already smells a cover-up. Lanning's lawyers screaming frame-up, the theatre crowds crying tragedy, and my office is catching hell. If you know anything that'll keep my phone quiet, now's the time. Wolfe's eyes half closed. When I possess something worth your attention, I shall present it. Within the law, not its periphery. Kramer ground the cigar into the ashtray like he was strangling it. Then, to my surprise, he sighed. All right, Wolfe, I'll wait for your report, but for once try to make it before the DA starts chewing on my tie. That will depend, Wolfe murmured, on the speed of your office in locating Lanning's pistol. Kramer grunted again, his version of farewell, and trudged to the door. Goodwin, he said, keep your nose clean, and tell your boss the next time a client phones him before dying, he should call me instead of reaching for a beer. I'll suggest it, I said, but don't expect progress. When the door closed, Wolfe exhaled and tugged the bell cord. Fritz appeared. Remove that ashtray, the odour of incinerated tobacco offends. Fritz nodded and vanished. Well, I said, that went swimmingly. He didn't even threaten a warrant. He is evolving, Wolfe said dryly. A faint but promising trend. He adjusted his cuffs. Archie, the surviving earring you retrieved, the jeweller's mark, did you note it? Tiny script, could be MT or a squiggle for optimism. Then locate the artisan. 5th Avenue, perhaps Madison. Bring me the provenance. You think it's important? I think, he said, that authenticity matters. Pearls, people, and truth alike can be cultured. We must know which we are dealing with. That was my cue to hit the pavement. By 2 o'clock I was walking through 5th Avenue's upper crust, where jewellery windows glittered like lies told with taste. Milo Trent's shop sat between a furrier and a perfume boutique, guarded by a clerk whose tie could double as a ransom note. Inside, Trent himself was a lean man with silver hair and fingers like delicate pincers. He looked me over as if I were a questionable gem. I'm looking for the craftsman who designed these, I said, showing him the photo Wolfe had ordered me to carry, the twin of Veronica Vale's earring. He took one glance and smiled faintly. My work, yes. Commissioned last week. A pair of South Sea pearls, perfectly matched. Who paid? A gentleman named Harold Lanning, cash, naturally. He wanted them ready by opening night. A gift for his leading lady, he said. The woman every man desired, etc. Did he mention why he preferred cash? Trent's smile sharpened. Some clients dislike records. I ask no questions so long as the bills are not counterfeit. That's patriotic of you. I serve beauty, not bureaucracy. Sure, and I serve coffee, not subpoenas. You still have the receipt? Of course, number 8843. He fetched a slim ledger and showed the entry. Lanning, 2 pearls, turned $200. Cash. Everything honest, or as honest as pearls ever are. Nice philosophy. Do you ever buy back pieces? Only from estates, he said, closing the book. Is the lady dead? I didn't answer. His eyes narrowed, but he didn't press. Back on the sidewalk, the afternoon sun glared off the storefronts. A newsstand headline screamed, Producer questioned in Star's murder. Lanning's face, smug even in newsprint, stared up at me. I headed back to the Brownstone where Fritz was laying the table for lunch. The smell of mushroom sauce made the place feel more civilized than murder deserved. Wolfe was already at his desk, dictating notes to himself like a Roman senator addressing an invisible scribe. Report, he said. Milo Trent confirms the earrings were his design, paid in cash by Harold Lanning last week. No record beyond a ledger entry. Wolfe's eyes gleamed. Then Lanning's generosity, or his guilt, precedes the death. Either motive will serve. Sit. I sat. You're thinking the pearls were a payoff? Or a lure? A woman who wears gifts from a lover she intends to betray is courting tragedy. Or good reviews. He ignored me. The police will chase the weapon. We shall chase authenticity. Who else knew of the commission? The jeweller's clerk, maybe the bookkeeper. Too tenuous, but it establishes timing. Archie, this implies premeditation, not passion. Meaning? Lanning bought the pearls before she died, but after the Garrick murder began haunting the news. He sought silence, not sentiment. I leaned back. So he bribed her to keep quiet about whatever she stole. Maybe that contract. Precisely. And when bribery failed, she got shot. Wolfe closed his eyes briefly. Yes, the pattern is vulgar but effective. He reached for the bell cord again. Fritz entered with lunch, cold pheasant, corn fritters and beer. Wolfe poured carefully, the foam rising like applause. You realize, I said, Kramer's going to love that Lanning connection. It ties up the package with ribbon and motive. Then let him love it, Wolfe said. Love blinds. We, meanwhile, must look. He lifted his glass, sipped and sighed. Archie, your report will include Trent's statement verbatim. Accuracy now will prevent embarrassment later. Yes, sir. And what's my next assignment? Pearl diving? He glanced at me with the faint amusement of a man humouring a pet. Your next assignment is lunch. Afterward, type a summary for our files. And Archie, tell Kramer nothing of Trent for now. Wouldn't dream of it. I enjoy living. Good. He reached for a fritter. I tolerate your levity because it oils the machinery. But do remember, humour cannot disinfect folly. I'll embroider that on a towel. He grunted, a sound halfway between irritation and affection, and turned back to his plate. The orchids would have to wait another hour. For now, Wolfe's appetite was the investigation's metronome. I picked up the phone to type in a memo to Saul, watching Wolfe through the haze of noon light. Outside, New York blared and bustled. Inside, precision and patience ruled. Somewhere uptown, Harold Lanning thought his cash had bought him safety. He was wrong. Wolfe was on his trail, and when Wolfe hunts from his chair, no one's performance lasts through the final act. The elevator ride to Harold Lanning's penthouse felt like climbing through money, each floor glossier than the last. When the doors opened, I stepped into a living room that could have passed for a jewelry store with delusions of grandeur. White carpet, mirrored bar, gold ashtrays, every inch screamed success loud enough to drown guilt. Lanning was draped on a chaise, half-dressed and sweating under a silk robe the colour of arrogance. Beside him, Gloria Dane leaned close with a damp cloth, her grief so ornamental it might have been borrowed from wardrobe. "Mr. Goodwin," she breathed, her tone making my name sound like a stage cue. "He's been ill all morning." "Ill," I said, "or allergic to police questions?" Lanning turned his head, eyes bloodshot but calculating. "You're Wolfe's man. I didn't invite this." "Sure, but you invited murder by proximity." I crossed to the bar. "Mind if I pour myself some tonic before it dissolves?" He ignored the jab. "You people think you know everything. I loved Veronica. She went insane. That contract meant nothing." I kept my tone polite enough for Fifth Avenue ears. The half that didn't burn said otherwise. It had your initials. His hand trembled, sending a little brandy splash onto the carpet. "Listen, I was being blackmailed. Wartime procurement, minor irregularities. Veronica found out. She said she'd keep quiet, but then she started threatening." From my pocket, the telephone line purred softly. Wolfe's device for eavesdropping without effort. I'd left it open on the table back home, receiver resting in a cradle rigged to pick up conversation. If the orchids weren't enough stimulation, this would keep him entertained. "Blackmail's an expensive hobby," I said. "Who was the collector?" He hesitated. She wouldn't say, only that she had proof. Photostats. Gloria's voice wavered. "She wasn't blackmailing him, Archie. I think she was protecting someone." "Such as you?" Her eyes widened. "I only meant she met a man. I saw them together once outside the theatre. His name was Howard Keane. He used to be a reporter." That had the smell of fresh bait. "Ex-reporter, huh? Maybe he's collecting headlines the hard way." Lanning snapped. "He's nothing to do with this. Veronica liked talking to anyone who'd listen to her tragedies. Funny, I said. She called one into us before her last act. Gloria dabbed at her eyes again, conveniently avoiding Lanning's glare. Her perfume was a battlefield all its own, something French that could smother truth in 3 sprays. I stepped toward the window, noting the skyline glittering in the haze. Manhattan by daylight looks honest, but that's just the lighting director's trick. Down below, a city full of alibis kept breathing. "Tell Wolfe," Lanning said hoarsely, "to leave me out of this circus. I've got investors, contracts, a show to run. I can't have scandal." "Relax," I told him. "Wolfe prefers scandal to clients. Keeps his blood pressure up." That earned me a strangled sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob from Gloria. "You think this is funny?" "Not especially, but it's educational. I've learned your boss buys jewelry with cash. Your friend keeps secrets with bullets, and you," I pointed at her hand, "ought to lay off the crocodile tears before they short-circuit the rug." Her cheeks flushed. "You're vile." "Only professionally." Lanning struggled upright, shaking. "Get out, Goodwin. Tell Wolfe I'll talk to him through my lawyer." "Suit yourself," I said, heading for the door. "But I charge by the hour, so if you remember anything true, call collect." Back at the Brownstone, Wolfe was where gravity left him, at his desk, the beer glass tilted toward perfection. I dropped my hat, my report, and a few choice adjectives. He listened, eyes narrowing at the name Howard Keene. Then he examined the froth in his glass as though it spelled prophecy. "Mr. Goodwin," he said at last, "our stage expands beyond the theatre. Corruption seldom confines itself to one spotlight." "Then I'll start widening the spotlight." His gaze rose. "No. Saul will trace this Keene. You will not." "Of course not," I said, with the kind of sincerity that should have come gift-wrapped. Wolfe's brow twitched, the fraction of a frown that meant he'd seen straight through me. "Archie." "Yes, sir?" "Disobedience is tolerable only when it's useful." "Then I'll make it useful." He sighed. "Phooey, you will." That was as close as Wolfe ever got to a blessing. I pocketed my notebook, planning to find the ex-reporter before Saul did, and before the next headline wrote itself. By the time I found Howard Keene, the bar had run out of customers sober enough to care who was buying. It was one of those West End joints that lived on nostalgia and gin fumes, an after-hours press club where the headlines had retired, but the reporters hadn't noticed. The neon outside said Clover Room, but inside it might as well have read Graveyard for Deadlines. Keene was in the corner booth, hunched over a glass of rye that had lost its ice an hour ago. He had the wiry look of a man who'd tried living on coffee and stories and found neither filling. His tie was crooked, his collar wilted, and his fingers kept drumming the table like they were on deadline for the afterlife. "Mr. Keene," I said, sliding into the opposite seat. "Archie Goodwin. I work with Nero Wolfe." He stared at me with eyes that had once belonged to an optimist. "I know who you are," he muttered. "The legman with the wise mouth. Veronica said you'd come." That raised one eyebrow. "She said that before or after she got herself murdered." He winced. "She didn't deserve it. She just wanted the truth out." "Truth's a pricey commodity," I said. "What was she selling?" He looked around, then leaned in. Lanning's war contracts. Kickbacks, shell companies, fake invoices. She had the papers, wanted me to publish them, said it'd buy her protection. "Or a coffin," I said. "You have those papers?" He reached inside his jacket, hand shaking like the last leaf on a November tree. "Right here. But I was followed. Somebody knows." "Probably everyone in this joint," I said. "Relax. I'm the friendliest face you'll see tonight." "Then we're both doomed," he said with a crooked grin. He pulled a manila envelope halfway out, then stopped. "We should—" That's as far as he got. A flash of white light cut through the window, too bright for a passing car, too quick for a second thought. The crack of the shot came a heartbeat later, and Keene folded against the table like a puppet with cut strings. The rye glass tipped, spilling amber over his sleeve. The envelope slid to the floor. I dropped low, gun out, and lunged for the window. The street outside was a blur of headlights and rain mist, though, for the record, it wasn't raining. Just city sweat again, same as always. A black sedan took the corner hard, tires squealing, and vanished into Broadway's electric haze. Keene was already gone, one bullet clean through the chest. The bartender gaped at me. "Sweet mother." "Call it in," I said, and keep your hands where they belong. By the time Pearlie Stebbins showed up, the room smelled of cordite and cheap gin. He had that bulldog expression that makes strangers apologize for crimes they haven't committed yet. "Goodwin," he said. "I might have known. Where you go, corpses bloom." "Funny," I told him. "I was about to say the same about you." He grunted, crouched beside Keene, and pried something from the dead man's hand. "Huh, matchbook." I leaned closer. Gold script on black. "The Caprice Club, Veronica Vale's old haunt." "That's a private place," I said. "Membership by vice only." Pearlie pocketed it. "We'll let the lab decide what it means." "Sure. Maybe it lights a clue." Kramer arrived 20 minutes later, looking like he'd wrestled both traffic and common sense to get here. His coat was unbuttoned, hat tilted, and cigar clamped like a weapon. "Goodwin," he barked. "Start talking." "Evening, Inspector. You're just in time for the obituaries." He ignored that. "You were meeting Keene, why?" "Because he was breathing, which is more than I can say now. He said Vale wanted him to publish her exposé on Lanning's graft. He didn't get to finish the pitch." "You see the shooter?" "Nope. Car headlights, one flash gone." "Gun?" "Outside shot. No weapon left behind. I ducked too slow to collect autographs." He stared at me through smoke. "You holding anything?" "Only disappointment." The envelope went missing in the excitement. He swore softly. "You realize how this looks?" "Sure," I said, like I should have ordered coffee instead. Kramer's mouth twitched. Maybe humor, maybe fatigue. "All right. Stay available." "I'm always available, Inspector. Ask any girl in the phone book." "Phooey," he muttered, though that line was usually Wolfe's department, and turned to Pearlie. "Seal it up. Get ballistics started." When I finally got back to the Brownstone, the clock in the hall said midnight. Fritz met me at the office door with a look that suggested I was tracking in trouble. "Mr. Wolfe is waiting," he said. I figured. Inside, Wolfe was behind his desk, lamp low, the telephone on its cradle, and a glass of beer sitting untouched. When Wolfe lets a beer get warm, it's the apocalypse. "Report," he said. I gave it to him. Bar, confession, gunfire, matchbook, death. He listened without interrupting, eyes half closed like a judge at an opera. When I finished, he exhaled heavily. "Another death and nothing gained," he said. "This case multiplies futility." "Cheer up," I told him. "At least Keene's shooting narrows the suspect list." "To what? The population of New York?" He shook his head. "We pursue not murderers, Archie, but liars. The former are merely efficient." "Comforting philosophy," I said. "Want me to call Kramer with that?" He opened his eyes. No, he would miss the irony. He reached for the beer, tasted it, and frowned. "It's warm." "Everything is tonight," I said. He didn't answer. The office went quiet except for the ticking clock. Outside, the city hummed, alive, corrupt, and waiting for its next witness. The Caprice Club had the kind of lighting that made everyone look like they belonged in a rumour. Velvet drapes swallowed sound, a trio murmured jazz in the corner, and the clientele came dressed in money, or the illusion of it. Saul Panzer and I entered separately, the way saints and sinners use different doors to the same church. He nodded once from the bar, his signal that my back was covered. I headed for the hat-check stand where a blonde with lacquered nails and an expression halfway between curiosity and boredom sized me up. "Evening, miss," I said, sliding a bill onto the counter. "I'm looking for a lady who used to make this place sparkle, a Veronica Vale." Her eyes flicked to the bill, then to me. "Haven't seen her in days. Heard she took an encore without applause." "Let's say I'm paying for the program notes. She come in alone last time." She toyed with a feathered hatpin. "Mostly with that producer, Lanning. Sometimes with a woman in a mink stole, couldn't see her face, the kind who orders champagne for everyone and drinks alone." "That narrows it down to half the clientele," she grinned. "Maybe. But the night before the murder, she came in with Councilman Briggs. He owns half this joint and most of the zoning board." I slipped her another $1 for civic cooperation and moved on. Saul's eyes followed me briefly before he drifted toward the rear exit, ready to trail our political patron of the arts if he made an appearance. The club's main room shimmered like a stage set, mirrored walls, tables spaced for gossip, and waiters trained to pretend they hadn't heard it. I ordered a ginger ale, strictly medicinal, and wandered toward a framed photo over the piano. There she was, Veronica Vale in sequins and smile, holding a glass beside none other than Councilman Briggs. The caption beneath read, "Art needs friends." Judging by the councilman's grip on her shoulder, he was a very close friend indeed. A waiter glided past, murmuring, "Another?" "No thanks," I said. "I'm saving room for scandal." He blinked, not sure if I was joking, and disappeared. Near the cashier's station, a clipboard of invoices sat unattended, open to a page marked Lanning, Harold. I spotted a slip underneath. Champagne, Dom Perignon, 2 bottles, charged to Lanning, signed VV. The date matched Veronica's last night alive. I slid the receipt under my notepad and traced it clean, making sure the original stayed put. Wolfe might be allergic to fieldwork, but he appreciated tidy evidence. Briggs appeared near the back hallway just then, shaking hands with a producer type whose tuxedo shone like a bad conscience. Saul, materializing from nowhere, gave me the faintest tilt of his cap. Message received. He'd tail Briggs when he left. I lingered long enough to finish my ginger ale, toss a tip, and give the hat check girl a wink that said, "You've been helpful but not memorable," which is the safest goodbye in my line of work. Outside, the street was slick with reflected neon. Saul's sedan rolled by slow. I caught his silhouette behind the wheel, tailing the councilman's Packard down toward Lexington. I let him handle it. My job was to report. By the time I got back to West 35th, the Brownstone was wrapped in its usual quiet dignity. Fritz met me in the hall with the faintest whiff of garlic trailing behind him. Dinner prep. He nodded solemnly toward the office. "Mr. Wolfe is occupied." "Orchid hours?" "Indeed, 4 to 6. I waited out the sacred time at my desk, writing up notes. At precisely 6:01, the elevator hummed and Wolfe descended, robe exchanged for brown suit, mood unreadable. He went straight to his chair, rang for beer, and gave me the look that meant report in full sentences. I handed him the receipt, the photostat, and my typed summary. The Caprice Club, velvet decor, political clientele, and more champagne than Versailles. Veronica signed for 2 bottles charged to Lanning the night before she died. She was also seen with Councilman Briggs. Saul's tailing him now. Wolfe examined the receipt, squinting as though it might confess. Champagne, an appropriate solvent for integrity. That's poetry, coming from you. He ignored me, holding the paper to the light. The initials, the signature, genuine. The handwriting is her own. Matches the letter she sent her agent last week. I checked the Gazette file. She was paying for the bubbles, but Lanning was footing the bill. He grunted. A woman publicly charging extravagance to a man's account is announcing either possession or rebellion. Which do you infer? She was mad, scared, or both, maybe to draw eyes away from whoever she was really meeting. He set the receipt down beside the pearl earring and the jeweler's note. His fingers tapped once on the desktop, precise as punctuation. The councilman, he said, represents politics embracing art. The union of graft and glamour is ever fertile, for trouble. Meaning? Meaning, Archie, our investigation no longer concerns mere passion. We tread in the muck of influence. If Briggs funded Lanning's production and Miss Vale held evidence of their collusion, her death is an investment. That makes Keen's shooting a dividend. Precisely. He raised his glass and sipped. Duplicity requires witnesses. It thrives on spectators. Perhaps Miss Vale tired of her role. I leaned against the filing cabinet. You think she planned to expose them? I think, Wolfe said slowly, that she underestimated the vigor of men who fear disclosure. He reached for a notepad and began dictating names. Lanning, Briggs, Gloria Dane, Saul, Keen, deceased, and one line labelled Mink Stole, unknown. Archie, he said, compose a memorandum for Saul. He will report at 9 tomorrow, and until then, no interruptions during my orchid session. I couldn't resist. You planning to solve this case by osmosis? Maybe the orchids know who pulled the trigger. He glared mildly. You may jest, but observation and patience achieve more than motion. Your incessant perambulation risks contamination of the facts. That's my charm, I said. I move fast enough to keep your facts interesting. He sighed, leaned back and closed his eyes. For a moment, the weight of it all, the murders, the lies, seemed to settle across his shoulders like a heavy robe. Then he murmured, almost to himself, "Power breeds corruption. Corruption seeks concealment. Concealment demands elegance. The Caprice Club offers all three." The bell cord quivered. Fritz appeared with a tray, beer for Wolfe, coffee for me. Routine, calm, civilized, a small island of order in the middle of a dirty ocean. I took my cup, glanced at the gleaming receipt on the desk and said, "You know, the Caprice serves scandal chilled. Want me to reserve a table?" Wolfe didn't open his eyes. "You may dine there when I am dead." "Fine," I said. "But by then, the kitchen will be out of champagne." He grunted. The office fell quiet except for the clink of glass and the slow tick of the clock. And somewhere uptown, Saul Panzer was tailing a councilman who didn't know that Nero Wolfe had just added his name to a very short, very final list. The Brownstone has survived city politics, murderers, and Fritz's experiments with saffron, but until that night, it had never hosted an uninvited guest after midnight. The trouble started earlier in the evening, when Saul phoned in from a pay booth near Madison. His voice was steady, but the words carried the static of bad news. "Briggs met Lanning 2 nights ago. Private room, Hotel Evers. No witnesses except a waiter who can't forget $100 tip. They argued. Briggs left first. I jotted it down. That's bedtime music for Wolfe." "Then tell him to play it soft," Saul said. "There's a tail on me now. Same mug I saw at the Caprice. Lose him and report in person." He grunted assent and hung up. I went to the office where Wolfe was brooding behind his desk as if trying to outstare the laws of physics. The orchids had done nothing to sweeten his mood. "Saul confirmed Briggs and Lanning had a midnight powwow," I told him. "The waiter's testimony cost a C-note." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "So the conspiracy tightens. Politics subsidizing theatre. An old story but newly lethal. Sit, Archie." When Wolfe says that, it's not an invitation. It's a directive. I sat. He began pacing, a rare sight, like a glacier on parade. "We have money, vanity, and fear interlaced. Miss Vale knew of their corruption, and the exposure of such would ruin both. Keene's murder removed the channel of publication. We are left with silence, bought and enforced." "Until someone pays us to make noise," I said. He gave me a look that could have chilled soup. "We already are paid, by conscience if not retainer." "That's a new line for you. Want me to frame it?" He ignored that and reached for the telephone. "Inspector Kramer, please." I raised an eyebrow. "Feeling sociable?" He didn't answer. When Kramer's voice growled through the receiver, Wolfe's tone turned formal. "Inspector, I offer cooperation, but in exchange, you will provide protection for Mr. Goodwin." Kramer barked something I couldn't hear. Wolfe's reply was slow and deliberate. "Because, Inspector, the next corpse may be his, and I would find that inconvenient." I mouthed thanks and got waved off. When he hung up, he looked at me, eyes sharp. "Archie, lock the basement door. I distrust coincidence, and Saul's tale implies surveillance." I went down with the .38 in my pocket, muttering about paranoia. The Brownstone's basement smelled like soap and concrete. Fritz kept it clean enough to perform surgery in. The furnace clicked softly, steady as a metronome. Everything was neat, normal, and boring, until I heard it. A faint scrape, metal against metal, then a thud. "Fritz!" I called. From the kitchen above, Fritz's voice quavered. "No, Mr. Archie. Someone down there." That was all I needed. I hit the light switch and dove behind the laundry rack. A shadow moved near the coal chute, broad-shouldered and quick. He wore a dark coat, the kind thugs think makes them invisible. "Friend," I said, "you're trespassing. Mr. Wolfe doesn't allow house calls without an appointment." The man turned, raising something shiny, knife or gun. I didn't wait to find out. I lunged, slammed him into the wall, and we went down hard. He was strong but clumsy. I had the edge until he jerked once, stiffened, and went limp. I rolled off him and stared. His face was already draining colour, eyes glassy. The knife clattered away. Between his teeth hung a cigarette stub, still smouldering. I plucked it out. The paper bore a gold monogram. CC. I didn't need Wolfe to tell me that stood for Caprice Club. Fritz appeared on the stairs in his nightrobe, pale as meringue. "Good heavens!" "Stay back," I warned. "He's done moving." By the time Wolfe arrived, robe belted and composure intact, I had the lights up and the intruder stretched on the floor. Wolfe stood over him, frowning like a disappointed headmaster. "Poison," he said after one glance. "Cyanide capsule hidden in the cigarette. A coward's exit, but efficient." "I'd call it unsporting," I said. "Breaking in, losing the fight and cheating me out of answers." He ignored the remark, studying the man's pockets. "No identification, of course." "Just the pack." I handed it over. Wolfe turned it in his fingers, noting the embossed initials. "They mean to silence not me," he said softly, "but the evidence." "That's flattering," I said. "We've finally made the big leagues. Someone's trying to kill our paper trail." He scowled. "Flippancy ill becomes peril, Archie." It keeps me from shaking. For once he didn't rebuke me. Instead he said, "Call Kramer." When Kramer arrived 20 minutes later, he was wearing a trench coat and the look of a man interrupted mid-argument with his wife. He surveyed the scene, cigar already blazing. "What now, Goodwin? A house guest?" "Uninvited. He brought his own poison," Wolfe explained succinctly. Kramer listened, chewing smoke, then knelt beside the body. "Looks like a pro. No prints, no ID, no pulse. You sure he didn't swallow that capsule on purpose?" "Deliberately," Wolfe said. He knew capture meant exposure. Kramer rose, grunting. "Fine. I'll send Stebbins with a crew. You'll both stay put till morning." "That suits me," Wolfe said. "I have no urge to wander." As Kramer left, I caught him muttering, "One of these days, Wolfe, you'll run out of miracles." Wolfe turned toward me. "Archie, note the hour, 12:48. Fritz, dispose of that cigarette carefully. The poison residue may assist the police." Fritz nodded, still shaken. "This is dreadful, Mr. Wolfe. Our home violated." "Indeed," Wolfe said gravely. "An invasion of sanctuary." I couldn't resist. "You mean a home invasion violates Wolfe's religious beliefs? Privacy." He glared but didn't disagree. "You will sleep with your revolver near at hand." "Under the pillow or in the milk glass?" "Enough, Archie." His tone softened. "I have indulged your levity tonight because fear must be diffused, not denied. But you will obey me." That was Wolfe's version of concern. I nodded. "Sure. If anyone else tries the basement, I'll greet him with lead instead of conversation." He sighed. "Let us hope it's unnecessary." He turned toward the stairs. "Tomorrow, we press harder. They've declared war." "On us?" "On truth." He paused, gaze distant. "And if necessary, I shall step outside to meet it." I blinked. "You mean literally?" He didn't answer, just mounted the stairs, leaving that bombshell hanging in the quiet. Fritz locked the basement door behind us. As I headed up to my room, I looked back once. The light still burned over the dead intruder, the gold CC glinting faintly on the cigarette pack. I thought about Wolfe's last words. He'd said them calm, certain. And for the first time in all the years I'd worked for him, I couldn't tell whether he was joking. If you ever want to see the impossible, don't bother with flying saucers. Just picture Nero Wolfe in an overcoat. It happened at 11:30 the next night, and I'm still not sure whether I dreamed it or just hallucinated from the shock. He came down the elevator like a monarch descending to abdicate, dressed in dark grey wool that strained politely against his shoulders. The fedora sat low, shadowing his eyes, and Fritz stood in the hall holding a silk scarf like it was a sacrament. "Good heavens, Mr. Wolfe," Fritz whispered. "You cannot—" "I can," Wolfe said, voice low but firm. "And I must." I managed to keep my mouth from hanging open. "You planning to walk or just terrify the city into confessing?" "Archie," he said, "fetch my cane. Tonight, deduction demands geometry." Which was his way of saying he wanted to see the Caprice Club's furniture arrangement. Me, I wanted to see the inside of a padded cell. For him or me, I wasn't sure which. We left through the back door, Fritz still crossing himself in Swiss, and eased the heron coupe from the curb. Wolfe settled in like a man boarding a gondola to hell. The city rolled by under street lamps, empty avenues, wet pavement, Manhattan exhaling its nightly sins. At a red light on 57th, I glanced over. "You realize this makes history. The Brownstone loses its gravitational pull, and you're the comet." He muttered, "I would prefer less astronomy and more discretion." "Sure, but wait till the Gazette hears, 'Wolfe walks.' That's front-page news." His glare could have frozen Broadway. We pulled up near the Caprice at 12:07. The doorman didn't know he was opening history. He just tipped his hat and held the door. Inside, the club looked the same. Velvet shadows, champagne whispers, and enough perfume to drown a conscience. Saul Pantzer was waiting in the corner, eyes sharp as always. He gave me a small nod. "They're here." Wolfe adjusted his hat brim. "Proceed," he said. We went through the side corridor to the private lounge, where Councilman Briggs and Harold Lanning were seated like twin devils reviewing their receipts. Lanning froze mid-cigarette. Briggs stood, face slick with sweat. "Good evening, gentlemen," Wolfe said, settling into a chair that looked like it feared for its legs. "Please resume your seats. I dislike talking to vertical objects." Lanning's voice wobbled. "Wolfe, what is this?" "An interview," Wolfe said. "Prompted by necessity. The geometry of your deceit required direct observation." Briggs blustered. "You've got no right barging in here. This is private property." "Indeed," Wolfe replied mildly. "All corruption is." I stayed near the door, my hand resting on my coat pocket where the 38 lived happily. Saul's silhouette lingered outside, insurance with a brim. Wolfe steepled his fingers. 2 years ago, during the city's wartime procurement contracts, you," he nodded at Briggs, "approved inflated bids for theatrical supply companies. Mr. Lanning's firm received the profits. Miss Veronica Vale obtained a contract proving it. She threatened to expose you both unless compensated. You agreed, temporarily. Then you removed the threat. Twice." Lanning's face turned grey. "That's a lie." Wolfe gestured toward me. "Archie, the fragment." I handed him the photostat of the burned contract corner. He laid it on the table. "Your initials, Mr. Lanning, and Miss Vale's. The original was stolen from her dressing room after her death." Briggs shifted. "You can't prove anything." Wolfe's tone chilled. "Proof is unnecessary when logic suffices. You bribed Keane to suppress the exposé. When he refused, you arranged his silencing. Tonight's visit is merely to confirm the geometry, the physical arrangement confirming opportunity. You, Mr. Briggs, sat here," he pointed to the lounge sofa, "with a direct line of sight to the service corridor where Miss Vale entered. You, Mr. Lanning, retained the access key." Lanning's hand trembled. "That's insane. How could you possibly know?" "The waitress described your cologne," Wolfe said. "A scent mixed exclusively by Andre on 47th Street. Miss Vale ordered the same for you in December." That one landed. Lanning's eyes darted toward Briggs, who hissed, "Keep your mouth shut." Wolfe leaned forward slightly. "And you, Councilman, financed the smuggling of European champagne through the Caprice's accounts to launder your bribe money. I believe the cork of one such bottle bears an import seal, illegal under the revised excise code." He reached into his coat and set a small object on the table, a champagne cork, gold foil still attached. Briggs stared at it like it might explode. "Where'd you get that?" "From your table this afternoon," Wolfe said. "My operative retrieved it. The symbol denotes a shipment never cleared through customs." Lanning bolted up. "I want a lawyer." "Of course," Wolfe murmured. "You'll have plenty of company." Right then, the club doors burst open and a familiar growl filled the room. "Nobody move!" Kramer strode in with Pearlie Stebbins and half a squad. The inspector's cigar was clenched in triumph. "Wolfe," he barked, "you're sitting in the middle of my raid." "Merely observing," Wolfe said calmly. "You're punctual." Kramer stared at him, half irritated, half impressed. "Punctual, hell! Panzer tipped me off you'd be here. I came to keep you from getting shot." "That was thoughtful," Wolfe said. "I dislike being perforated." Briggs sputtered. "This is entrapment." Kramer snorted. "You entrapped yourself, Councilman. We've got enough to hang you twice." Stebbins moved in, cuffing Lanning, who had gone the colour of unbaked dough. Briggs resisted, shouting something about immunity, until Wolfe spoke again. "Inspector, before you depart, note the cork on the table. It will tie Mr. Briggs to the Caprice's import accounts. You will find additional bottles in the basement cellar behind the second wall panel." Kramer's eyes narrowed. "You sure of that?" "Quite," Wolfe said. "And, Inspector, do remember my condition. Mr. Goodwin's protection." Kramer grunted. Yeah, he'll get it." He paused, looking almost human. "You sure you're all right, Wolfe? You don't exactly blend in with nightlife." Wolfe permitted himself a small regal nod. "I have endured worse environments, though none so redolent of deceit." Kramer turned away to bark orders. Within minutes, Briggs and Lanning were escorted out, their protests muffled by the music resuming in the main room. When the last of the uniforms cleared, Wolfe stood slowly, cane braced. "Archie." "Yeah?" "Let us leave before I succumb to the atmosphere. It reeks of expenditure without value." I opened the door and guided him out. Saul met us at the curb, grinning faintly. "You did it," he said. Wolfe's reply was curt but proud. "We did it." I got him back into the Heron, and for the first 5 blocks he said nothing. The city lights washed over his face, calm and monumental. Finally I said, "You realize walking into a club at midnight counts as moral courage in your book?" He replied softly, "Motion, Archie, is sometimes required of men, and of ideas. Tonight, both advanced." I couldn't top that, so I drove in silence, watching the brownstone grow larger in the windshield like a lighthouse. When we reached home, Wolfe let me help him out, then straightened, tall and immovable again. Inside, Fritz was waiting near tears. "You are safe, sir?" "Entirely," Wolfe said, "though the world has grown more tedious." He started for the stairs. "Archie, tomorrow at 11, Orchids." "Back to normal?" I asked. He paused halfway up. "No, Mr. Goodwin. Tonight I left the brownstone. Normal is behind us." And with that he ascended, our private colossus retreating to his temple, leaving me in the hall with the faint scent of city air and history clinging to his coat. Morning came in polite shades of sunlight through the Venetian blinds, but the brownstone felt like a backstage before opening night, too quiet to be calm. Fritz tiptoed through the hall like an usher afraid of applause, and the smell of coffee and buttered rolls did little to disguise the tension in the air. Even the orchids upstairs were being neglected, and that, in our domestic calendar, qualified as the apocalypse. Wolfe was already in his chair when I came down, his bulk wrapped in brown wool and thought. The yellow chair looked relieved to have him back in it. The universe had snapped back into place. He was motionless except for one finger tapping the armrest, a sound like a metronome counting down judgment. "Good morning," I said, setting the morning papers on his desk. "You made page 1 again. The Gazette's headline reads, 'Councilman arrested, Wolfe walks.'" He frowned. "A vulgar pun." "They all are," I said, pouring my coffee. "You could sue for defamation, but you'd have to admit you walked." He didn't dignify that with a reply. His eyes were on the orchid's ledger beside him, closed and untouched. "Horstman may attend to them today. I cannot." That was Wolfe speak for, "I'm rattled." The last time he'd skipped orchid hours, Pearl Harbor had made the news. Fritz appeared at the doorway, clutching his towel like a peace offering. "Breakfast, sir." "In an hour," Wolfe said curtly. "Later, if necessary." Fritz retreated. The brownstone breathed again. "Archie," Wolfe said, "has Saul reported?" "Not yet. Last word, Kramer's been wrestling the DA. Seems the evidence against Briggs and Lanning isn't tight enough to gift wrap." He nodded once. "Expected. The DA requires the noose to be woven before he ties it." "Kramer's due here around 9, I said. "Hat in hand, they say." Wolfe's lip twitched. "I doubt the gesture will flatter him." He reached for a card index on his desk and began sorting names like a priest handling relics. "We shall host a final interview this afternoon. The principals, Lanning, Gloria Dane, Briggs and Mr. Stebbins as witness. The performance concludes where it began, here." "Tickets at the door?" I asked, "because those red chairs still get the best reviews." He shot me a glance halfway between irritation and amusement. "Your levity may survive until noon. After that, silence." I made a show of writing that down. "Note to self, gag order begins at lunch." At precisely 9:30 the bell rang. Fritz appeared seconds later with a look of alarm. He'd probably expected another nocturnal visitor with poisoned cigarettes, but this one came bearing only procedural smoke. Inspector Kramer entered without his usual bluster. He looked like he'd been awake for days, tie crooked, cigar unlit, jaw bristled. What stood out wasn't the fatigue, though, it was the hat. He was holding it, not wearing it. "Morning, Wolfe," he said, low and cautious. "You're a damn sight better rested than I am." "I prefer comfort to chaos," Wolfe said. "Sit." Kramer sat. He even waited for permission, which told me the world was shifting under our feet. "The DA's in a twist," Kramer began. "He's got Briggs on corruption, maybe smuggling, but murder. No direct tie. Lanning's lawyer's already screaming coercion. We've got motive and opportunity, but nothing that sticks. Your usual lament, Wolfe said. You arrest too early, then seek the evidence backward. Kramer grunted. And you hoard your evidence until you can stage a performance. Wolfe's eyes gleamed. An apt metaphor, Inspector. Today's performance concludes the act. I slid Kramer a cup of coffee. He accepted it with a grunt, which was the 20th precinct equivalent of thank you. Wolfe turned to me. Mr. Goodwin, telephone Miss Dane, request her presence at 11, then call Lanning's attorney, and the councilman, if he's granted bail. I made the calls. Gloria's voice came sleepy and brittle, the kind that's been up rehearsing lies. Lanning's secretary relayed a grudging confirmation. Briggs, I learned, had posted bail at dawn. The stage, as Wolfe put it, was set. By the time I hung up, Kramer was pacing in front of Wolfe's desk, like a bear in a narrow cage. If you've got something that'll make this case stick, Wolfe, now's the time. The DA's patience isn't... Patience is the least abundant of virtues, Wolfe interrupted, but understanding requires time. I propose one more interview in my office. You and Stebbins will attend. The guilty will expose themselves. They always do. Kramer barked a dry laugh. You'll forgive me if I don't buy tickets to that show. You'll attend anyway, Wolfe said, calm as stone. At 1 o'clock sharp. Kramer glared, then nodded once. All right, Wolfe, I'll play audience. But if this goes sideways, it's on you. He left, still holding the hat. I wondered if he'd forgotten to put it back on, or was just too tired to remember how. The morning crawled by on nerves and caffeine. Wolfe dictated notes, rehearsing questions aloud like lines from a grim play. I typed them, pretending not to notice that he was restless. His chair creaked more than usual, and twice he reached for the bell cord without pulling it. Archie, he said finally, you will position the red chairs opposite the desk. Gloria nearest the window, Lanning to her left, Briggs opposite me, Inspector Kramer on the end, Stebbins beside him. Shall I sell programs? He ignored that, adjusting his cuffs. This is not theatre. Could have fooled me, I said. We've got an audience, a cast, and a leading man who hates standing ovations. He glared, but there was something like gratitude buried beneath it. Archie, there are occasions when your impudence serves as ballast. I'll take that as affection. Take it as tolerance. At noon, Fritz served lunch, a subdued affair of cold chicken salad and rolls. Wolfe ate mechanically, barely tasting. At one point, Fritz asked if he should prepare the dining room for guests later. No, Wolfe said, they are not guests. They are instruments. Fritz blinked, bowed, and retreated. At 12:55, the first arrival was Gloria Dane, in a black dress that looked more expensive than her career. Her eyes were hidden behind dark glasses. She removed them only after Wolfe's nod. Mr. Wolfe, she murmured, I don't understand why I'm here again. Haven't I told the police everything? You have told them much, Wolfe said, but not the truth. She flushed, sank into the chair I indicated, and lit a cigarette with a shaking hand. Lanning followed, a shadow of the man who'd swaggered through Broadway openings. He looked older, smaller, and thoroughly lawyered. I'm only here under protest, he said. Protest noted, I told him. Take a seat before it collapses without you. Briggs arrived last, escorted by Stebbins. The councilman looked wilted in the daylight, hatless and sweating. Kramer brought up the rear, cigar clenched unlit between his teeth. The office felt crowded, air thick with perfume, starch, and suspicion. Wolfe surveyed them like a director inspecting miscast actors. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, we are here to conclude an inquiry into 3 deaths. The actress Veronica Vale, the journalist Howard Keane, and an unnamed assailant who entered this house 2 nights ago. Each was silenced for knowledge of the same crime. That crime concerns the misuse of wartime procurement funds by Mr. Lanning's company and the concealment thereof by Councilman Briggs. Miss Vale possessed a contract. Objection, Lanning's lawyer started, but Wolfe raised a hand. Silence. You will find the law more merciful than I. That got him quiet. Miss Vale intended to expose your fraud, Wolfe went on. Mr. Keane prepared the story. Their deaths ensured their silence. The intruder who perished here sought to destroy the final evidence. Gloria gasped softly, flicking ash into the tray. You can't think... I can and do, Wolfe said. But the question remains, who ordered it? Briggs leaned forward. This is nonsense. You've got nothing but theatrics. Wolfe's gaze fixed him like a pin. Theatrics, perhaps, but even the theatre demands rehearsal. You met with Mr. Lanning 2 nights before the murder. The waiter remembers your quarrel. You financed the payoff through smuggled champagne, and when Miss Vale refused your final offer, you ordered her removal. Kramer stiffened but stayed silent. He knew the rhythm of Wolfe's show, the part where the music built before the curtain fell. Briggs slammed a hand on the armrest. That's a damn lie. Lanning shot him a look that was pure panic. Harry, for God's sake. Shut up, Wolfe's voice cut through them. Indeed, Mr. Briggs, do be silent. You are most eloquent when not speaking. For a moment, the room held its breath. Then Wolfe turned his gaze to Gloria. Miss Dane, you accompanied Miss Vale to the Caprice the night of her death. Why? Gloria hesitated. She wanted to confront someone. I thought it was Lanning. Not Lanning, Wolfe said softly. Briggs. She looked up, startled. No, I didn't know he'd be there. Yet you saw him leave, Wolfe said. You followed her into the alley moments later. Her lipstick trembled. I didn't kill her. I believe you, Wolfe said, almost gently. But you lied about what she carried, a small envelope addressed to Mr. Keene. You removed it after the shot. Her eyes widened, tears spilling. She was dead. I thought, if I destroyed it, the killing would stop. Wolfe leaned back. But destruction never ends killing, Miss Dane. It only delays it. Briggs was sweating rivers. She's lying. This whole thing is rigged. Kramer rose. Shut your mouth, Briggs. Briggs stood, pointing. You can't pin this on me. Sit down, I said. You're ruining my view. He lunged for the door. Stebbins was faster. In a flash, the handcuffs clicked. Wolfe didn't move. Inspector, I believe the councilman has confessed sufficiently for your stenographer. Kramer looked at Wolfe, then at Briggs, who'd gone limp in the cuffs. Yeah, he said gruffly. He's said enough. As Stebbins hauled Briggs out, Gloria buried her face in her hands. Lanning slumped, whispering to himself. The performance was over. Wolfe closed his eyes for a moment, as though listening for applause that never came. Then he said, Mr. Goodwin, record the hour. 1:47, I said. Phooey, he muttered softly. Late as usual. Kramer lingered by the door. You did it again, Wolfe. Damn me if I know how, but you did. Wolfe inclined his head. Understanding, Inspector, is not witchcraft. It is merely patience wearing spectacles. Kramer's mouth twitched, the closest he came to a smile. All right, Wolfe. I'll wait for your report. He left without slamming the door, which might have been a miracle in itself. Fritz entered, pale but composed. Shall I bring beer, sir? Yes, Wolfe said. 2 glasses. I raised an eyebrow. 2? He looked at me. Archie, even moral victories require commemoration. When Fritz returned, Wolfe poured, lifted his glass, and nodded once. To truth, he said. I clinked mine, and to red chairs, the best seats on Broadway. He grunted, took a sip, and reached for the bell cord. The performance was over, the curtain down, and for once the audience had survived.